The sun rose slowly over the sleepy town of Nsia, casting a warm orange glow over tin rooftops and dirt roads. Roosters crowed in the distance, and the scent of firewood smoke drifted through the air. Amid the stir of waking life, a young woman named Amina prepared for her day. She tied a faded headscarf around her thick, curly hair and swept the dust from around her small wooden stall. It was nothing grand, just a bench, a table, and 2 large pots of rice and beans that she cooked every morning before dawn. Amina's food was known for its rich flavor and generous portions. Her secret was simple: she cooked with care, the same way her late mother taught her. Life in Nsia was not easy. Amina had no husband, no children, and no relatives close by. Her parents had died when she was just 16, and since then, she had carried herself with quiet strength. She worked alone, earned little, and yet she never complained. She believed that peace came from doing what was right, even when no one noticed. It was on a dusty Wednesday, during the Harmattan season, that she first noticed the man. He was seated under a neem tree across the road, half hidden in shadow. His legs were bent awkwardly beneath him, clearly crippled. His clothes were old and worn, and his skin was rough from the sun. A small metal plate sat beside him on the ground, but it was empty. He didn't speak. He didn't beg. He just sat there, eyes lowered, still as stone. Amina felt something stir in her chest. She dished a plate of hot rice and beans, added a boiled egg, and crossed the road. The man didn't look up until she knelt beside him. "Here," she said gently, placing the plate on the ground. "Eat. It's still warm." He stared at her, confused, as if unsure whether to accept. Then he nodded slowly and took the food with trembling hands. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse like dry leaves rustling in the wind. That was how it began. The next day, he was there again. Amina brought him food once more, and again the day after that. She asked nothing about his past and never offered pity. She simply fed him, always with a smile. Soon, it became a quiet ritual. Every day around noon, she would glance across the road. He'd be there, silent, patient. And she would bring him a plate. People began to notice. At first, they said nothing. But in a small town, silence never lasts long. Murmurs began to follow her like shadows. She gives free food to a cripple. She's wasting her money. Is she mad or just desperate for attention? Still, Amina didn't stop. Even on days when she had only 1 egg left, even when she made barely enough for herself, she always made sure there was a portion for him. Because to Amina, kindness didn't need a reason. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know his story. But what she did know was this: no one deserved to be invisible. And that was enough for her. By the 3rd week, almost everyone in Nsia had heard the story. "Amina feeds that crippled man every day," whispered the tomato seller. "She doesn't even know where he's from," muttered the tailor. "She should be saving her food, not giving it to someone who can't help her in return," scoffed a young man who sold second-hand clothes nearby. They laughed. Some rolled their eyes. Others shook their heads in disbelief. In a town where every grain of rice counted, what Amina was doing seemed foolish, at least to them. But Amina didn't pay attention to the laughter or the looks. Every day, at the same time, she scooped rice and beans into a tin bowl, added a boiled egg, and crossed the road. She always smiled as she approached the man under the tree. He always greeted her with quiet gratitude. Musa, she called him now. He had never told her his name, but the name had come to her one morning like a whisper from the wind. He had smiled when she first said it, so it stuck. Each time he took the bowl from her hands, there was a silence between them, not awkward, but deep, like an understanding that needed no words. Amina could tell he wasn't used to being seen. His eyes, dark and observant, always held a flicker of surprise, like kindness was a language he had forgotten how to speak. One day, the market chairwoman, Madame Dora, called Amina aside. "You're a good girl," she said, arms folded over her chest. "But people are talking. That man, he could be dangerous. You don't know who he is. He could be a thief or worse." "He could also be someone in need," Amina replied simply. Madame Dora frowned. "Kindness is good, but don't be naive. Business is slow already. If people stop buying from you, what will you eat? Amina didn't answer. She just thanked Madame Dora and went back to her stall. Business was slowing down. A few regulars had stopped coming. Some claimed the food tasted different now, though nothing had changed. Others said they didn't want to sit near that man or be associated with charity. Some days, Amina had to choose between buying more firewood or keeping enough to eat dinner. Still, every day, she made sure there was enough for Musa. One afternoon, when the sky threatened rain and customers were few, Musa spoke for the first time beyond his usual thank you. "You could stop, you know," he said. "You don't owe me anything." Amina looked at him and smiled. "If I gave only to people who could give back, then it wouldn't be kindness." Musa stared at her, blinking slowly. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he murmured. Before she could ask who, he looked away, his eyes fixed on the distant hills as thunder rumbled in the distance. That night, as she packed up her stall and counted her meager earnings, Amina felt the weight of every sacrifice she had made. Her fingers were stained with groundnut oil. Her shoulders ached from lifting pots. Her stomach growled softly. But in her heart, there was peace. Because even if no one else saw value in what she did, she knew. And she believed, deeply, that kindness, even when unnoticed or unreturned, was never wasted. The sky over Nsia turned gray that morning, as if it sensed something was about to change. Amina arrived at her usual time, carrying her pot of steaming rice and beans with one hand and balancing a tray of fried plantains on her head. The scent of roasted groundnuts lingered in the air, mixing with the earthy smell of fresh rain on dry ground. Her headscarf fluttered in the wind as she set up her stall. She looked across the road. The neem tree stood silent. Empty. Musa wasn't there. She waited a moment, expecting him to appear, maybe wheeling himself in slowly, as he often did, with that soft nod of greeting. But the hour passed. Then another. Her eyes kept flicking to the tree as she served customers. By afternoon, she was no longer pretending to be calm. She crossed the road and walked up to the tree. His usual spot was undisturbed, no wheel tracks in the dust, no sign of his plate, no trace of him. "Musa?" she called softly. "Nothing." She asked the roasted yam seller who sat a few meters away, "Did you see the man who usually sits here?" The woman shrugged. "No. He hasn't come today. Maybe he's moved on." Amina's heart dropped. She went to the nearby herbal clinic, thinking perhaps he had fallen ill. The nurse shook her head. "We haven't seen anyone like that here." She searched the neighborhood, asked shopkeepers, even walked to the edge of town. No one had seen him. It was as though he had vanished into the air. That night, Amina barely touched her dinner. She lay awake, eyes open, staring at the roof of her small room, listening to the sound of distant frogs croaking in the dark. For weeks, she continued to bring a plate of food to the tree, setting it down where he used to sit. People watched. Some laughed louder now. She still thinks he'll come back. She's feeding ghosts now. But Amina didn't care. Each time she placed the food down, she would sit quietly for a few minutes, watching the road. "Musa," she whispered once, "I hope you're okay. I don't need to know why you left, just that you're safe." One day, she left a plate as usual, but when she returned the next morning, the food was untouched. The plate was just as she'd left it, cold and full. Her heart sank deeper. Had he ever really been just a beggar? Where had he gone? And why, after everything, had he disappeared without a single word? She could not explain it. But something inside her told her that Musa's story wasn't over yet. And neither was hers. Weeks passed, and life went on in Nsia. The rainy season arrived, and the dusty red roads turned soft and muddy. Amina's food stall, once surrounded by friendly chatter, now stood mostly quiet. Some days, she made barely enough to cover the cost of firewood and tomatoes. But she still came. She still cooked. And each morning, she still looked across the road, even though the tree remained empty. Then one market day, as the sky cleared and a breeze swept through the town, a black SUV rolled into the center of Nsia. It was unlike anything the villagers had seen, shiny, spotless, and humming like a machine from another world. It stopped by the roadside near the neem tree. Doors opened, and out stepped two men in dark sunglasses. They looked around, scanning the market in silence. Whispers began. Who are they? They look like they're from the city. Are they looking for someone? A third man stepped out of the car. Tall, graceful, clad in fine native wear, cream-colored, embroidered neatly with gold trim. His skin was smooth, his gait steady, and his face, somehow familiar. Amina was serving a customer when she noticed the movement. Her eyes flicked up and froze. It was him. Musa. But it wasn't. Gone were the worn clothes, the slumped posture, the silent presence under the tree. This man walked tall. His eyes were sharp, confident, and he wasn't using a wheelchair. Amina's breath caught. He was coming straight toward her. People stepped aside as he approached, whispers rising in waves. Some stared. Some followed. The whole market seemed to pause, watching. He stopped in front of her stall. She stared at him, bowl of rice still in her hand. For a long moment, they said nothing. His eyes searched hers, not with pity or pride, but something deeper. Something honest. You remembered, she whispered. He gave a small smile. How could I forget? Amina's heart pounded. She still couldn't believe it. The man she had fed with quiet compassion was not who she thought. You're walking, she said softly. I always could, he replied. But I needed to know who would see me when I had nothing. People gasped around them. Amina's hands trembled, the bowl slipping slightly. He caught it. Please, he said gently, sit with me. I owe you more than you know. The market was no longer whispering. It was roaring. Children peeked around baskets. Vendors stood on stools. Madame Dora's mouth hung open in disbelief. Who was this man? Why had he come back? And why, of all people, was he speaking to Amina like she was the important one? Amina sat slowly, her eyes never leaving his. Something told her the answers were only just beginning. The whole village buzzed with questions. Some thought the man was a prince. Others whispered he was a politician's son. A few even claimed he was a spirit testing the hearts of men. But none of them knew the truth. Only Amina did, because he chose to tell her. They sat together under the neem tree where he once begged. He asked her gently, "Can we talk, somewhere quiet?" Amina nodded and led him to the back of her mother's old house, where a wooden bench stood beneath a pawpaw tree. The air smelled of wet earth and ripe fruit. He introduced himself properly for the first time. My name is Idris, he said. Idris Okoye. I own a construction firm in Lagos, a few hotels across the country, and a foundation that helps orphans and the homeless. Amina's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly. She still couldn't reconcile the man before her with the one she'd fed with her own hands. But why pretend to be poor? He looked away, then back at her with quiet honesty. After my mother died, I started that foundation in her name. But over the years, I noticed something strange. The reports I got, the pictures, the stories, felt polished. Like people only showed kindness when the cameras were watching. He paused, his voice lowering. So I decided to go out myself. Disguised. Alone. I picked small villages, different towns each month. I'd live simply, sit quietly, and watch. I wanted to see the truth. Amina listened without interrupting. Her heart beat faster. In all the places I went, he continued, people turned their faces away. Some mocked me. Some offered help, but only when others were watching. But you? He looked at her now, eyes softening. You fed me when no one was looking. You spoke to me like I mattered. Even when others warned you, even when they laughed, you came back. Amina swallowed the lump rising in her throat. I didn't do it for anything, she said quietly. I just couldn't ignore someone hungry. Idris smiled, gentle and full of something close to awe. That's why I'm here, he said. Not just to say thank you, but because your kindness reminded me of my mother. She used to say, the most generous hearts live in the quietest people. You've proven her right. A long silence passed between them. Then, softly, Idris added, Amina, I came here with a gift. But it's more than money. It's a door. One I want you to walk through. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? He stood, took a small envelope from his pocket, and handed it to her. Inside was a letter, stamped and sealed, and a set of business cards. Amina unfolded the letter. It was an official offer, an invitation to run her own food business in the city, fully funded by his foundation. He had already prepared everything, the space, the equipment, and a mentorship program. All she had to do was say yes. Her hand trembled. I don't know what to say. Say what your heart tells you, Idris replied gently. But know this, you are seen. And you are worth more than you've ever been told. Tears brimmed in Amina's eyes. She had spent years being overlooked, laughed at, ignored. All she ever wanted was to make enough to survive and help others when she could. Now, someone had seen her. And that changed everything. The sun rose softly over Nsia the next morning, bathing the village in warm gold. The usual sounds of chickens clucking and pots clanging echoed through the air. But something felt different. Word had spread. Not just about the rich man in disguise, but about Amina, the food seller who had changed a billionaire's life with nothing but kindness and a bowl of rice. A small crowd had gathered near her stall. Some came out of curiosity. Others came out of guilt, people who once mocked her, now too ashamed to meet her eyes. Madame Dora stood off to the side, fanning herself nervously. Even the village chief had sent word, "Tell her we are proud." But Amina was not at the stall. She was packing. Inside her modest home, she folded her mother's apron carefully, tears falling silently onto the cloth. She touched the wall where an old photo of her parents still hung, her father with his laughter lines, her mother with eyes that always saw beyond what others missed. She whispered, "I hope I made you proud." Outside, Idris waited beside the SUV, dressed simply this time, no fancy embroidery, no guards. Just a quiet man with deep respect in his eyes. When Amina stepped out carrying a small bag, the crowd parted. He offered her a smile. "Ready?" She nodded, her voice soft but steady. "Yes." They got in the car, and as it began to pull away, something beautiful happened. One by one, villagers stepped forward, not to stare or gossip, but to clap. Soft, slow claps that grew into something steady. Some bowed their heads. Others waved. Even Madame Dora, wiping her eyes, whispered, "Go and shine, child." Amina smiled through tears, her fingers pressed against the window as she waved goodbye to the life that had shaped her. Months later, in a quiet corner of Lagos, the doors of a small restaurant opened for the first time. The sign above read, "Amina's Table, Made with Heart." Inside, the scent of jollof rice and fried plantains floated through the air. Photographs of her village decorated one wall. A small plaque near the entrance read, "Dedicated to those who give without expecting, you are the true wealthy." Business was slow at first, but it grew, just like she had. Customers came for the food but stayed for the warmth. Amina greeted each person by name. She made sure no one ever left hungry, even if they couldn't pay. And sometimes, late at night, a familiar figure would visit. Idris. He never made a show of it. He'd sit quietly, eat a simple plate of food, and leave a generous tip. One night, as they locked up together, he turned to her and said, "Do you know why I picked your village?" She shook her head. "My mother once told me that if I ever lost my way, I should go to where people still give before they receive. Nsia was that place. You were that person." Amina smiled, her heart full. Not because of the money. Not even because of the success. But because her kindness, quiet, humble, and constant, had changed her life and someone else's. And that was more than enough.